Maria, how are you feeling today?
How am I feeling today? I haven't really self-reflected today as much as I should. I'm feeling very excited for being here. I really wanted to meet you. So we've been speaking for a while. We had a meeting already. So I really wanted to meet you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for reaching out as well. So I'm glad that we've crossed paths because I had no idea that you'll be living and working here in Malta for quite so long. And actually we're quite surprised that we never crossed paths as well with each other. So I'm glad that we've did so right now. Maria, I'm just going to jump right into it. Here we have your book, Leaders Made from Within. What's the story behind the book?
Oh, that's a good question. What's the story? The story started many years ago. Obviously, I've always been in the leadership development space. But when I started my doctorate, which was 6 years ago, I believe it was, I had to choose my research topic. I already knew that I wanted to focus on leadership development. So for the past 6 years, I've been spending a lot of time researching on a daily basis about leadership development, and organizational development as well, because leadership is just one part of organizational development. So I dedicated a lot of time researching the topic. And at the end of it, last year, I graduated, I got my doctorate, and I felt it was time to write a book. I felt that it was time for me to, obviously I had published my thesis, but it was an academic piece. So I wanted something that was specifically aimed at practitioners like myself. Something that can be easily understood, can be easily applied. Perhaps not easily. Leadership development is not an easy thing,
yes,
but simple. It's easy to understand, it's simple. And I also made it a point for it not to be academic. I wanted it to be very practical. And I also wanted it to have my sense of humor, which is part of it.
Okay.
So this is how it went. And last year I actually published the book. It's been a long time of, working on the book, writing, editing, and drafting, and then obviously the publishing process that went into it. But I'm very happy. I'm very happy with the result. The book has sold across all of the Amazon marketplaces, and I've gotten a lot of expert endorsements, both from academics but also from practitioners, other authors. So I'm very happy with the outcome.
Wonderful. Congrats, first of all.
Thank you.
It's always nice to see your work having an impact outside as well. How did you manage to organize yourself? I know that for a PhD, you need to organize yourself, and it is a bit of a longitudinal study of sorts. So you need to have your ideas organized. But how did you manage to condense them and make them in a practical way, in a relatively short version in a book?
Yes, it's 300 pages long. So it's relatively short. So the way I did it was, again, I approached it from a practitioner's point of view. The book is organized around a framework I created. So the first chapter is basically the fundamentals of leadership and leadership development. Again, given in a very practical way. There's obviously science behind it. Everything I write is based on research, based on science, but it's given in a very practical way.
Okay.
And if you open the book, you will see that it's organized in chapters, and then there are questions and answers. So this is how the book is organized. So the first chapter is the fundamentals, and then every other chapter is based on the 5D framework, as I call it. So 5Ds in order to design and implement a leadership development program that will have a positive ROI. So the first is obviously you need to define what leadership means in your organization, what successful leadership means, not successful, effective leadership means, and what are those leadership competencies that the leaders within your organization need at different levels, different functions. So once that has been defined, then obviously you need to design a program that basically meets those needs. and obviously the challenges of the organization as well. Every industry, every organization has its unique challenges. So then we design program based on that. That's the second D.
Okay.
Then we develop and deliver the program, and we deploy, because deployment is the most important part in my view. If we don't give opportunities for leaders to actually practice what they've learned, it's inevitable that they will forget what they've learned, and it's not going to lead to behavioral change. So this is a very important element. And finally, it's the debrief element. So this is the 5D, which is where we evaluate our leadership development programs, our leadership development initiatives, processes, and so on. Because obviously, when you work within an organization, everything you do has to have a positive ROI.
I appreciate the debriefing part of it, because there is, I think, where the reflective part of the approach happens, which is the from within comes in, I think, because a leadership style is developed over time, and it is continuously developed. And I think it's molded and shaped based on our experiences and our sense of self as well. And you mentioned humor. I think humor is sometimes misused or underused at times, because we don't know our sense of humor and when and how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to know also how it's going to be perceived by others. Everybody has a different perception of what's acceptable and what's not, what's actual humor and what's perhaps an insult. So you really need to test the waters before you use your humor, and use it in the right way. I like to use my humor, obviously in a way that is not insulting to anyone. But I think this is what makes things interesting as well. And I think many situations, especially in the workplace, where things might be a little bit rigid or things could easily escalate, I think humor is the key ingredient to actually build relationships, de-escalate situations, and generally make people feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Writing a book is a bit of a journey.
Absolutely.
What did it teach you about yourself?
Well, it taught me things, some of the things I already knew. I'm very persistent. When I want something, it will be done, and it will be done in the time frame I've set for it. And I think this is a key element when it comes to writing a book, because obviously you get the writer's block. Even if it's a book which is more scientific or more academic, you always... I think we all have the tendency to self-doubt when we're writing, how it's going to be perceived. Is it going to be understood the way I'm writing it? But this is where you actually need to sit down and write and set goals, I believe, of how much you want to write today, how much you want to write in a week, in a month, and so on. So I already knew I had that in me, because I had published work before, not a book, that was my first book, but I had published research papers and so on. So I knew I had that. What I've learned is that, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist as well, that I do have the ability to let go.
Okay.
I do have the ability to let go. It's not easy, and I'll go back to it and try to, re-edit, but you reach a point where that editing doesn't really add any more value to what you've written already. And the other thing is, obviously, then you need to make decisions in terms of how you're going to market the book, if you're going to hire anyone to edit the book, the design of the book. For instance, in my case, when it came to the design of the book, I had a very clear vision of what I wanted the cover of the book to be. So when I worked with a designer, I was quite instructional in the way I wanted the scarves. And obviously, at the beginning, you want to be open to ideas, because it's a whole different science that I'm not really familiar with. I'm not an expert in that field, and you always have the idea of, okay, you might have an idea of how you want it to look based on what you've written. And so it basically expresses the meaning and the key messages of the book. But is it going to sell? That's a different story, right? in this particular case, I went with my gut, and I went with what I wanted the key messages of the book to be. Probably if you ask the designer of the cover, he would have a very different idea of what the cover should have been. But if you look at it, if you see, for instance, you have a statue, and I was very clear in terms of it being unfinished from the waist below, because the key message is that we always continuously learn. You're never done when it comes to development. You're never going to be the best version of yourself in that sense. There's always something more you can do. So that's the unfinished part from the waist below. It's a self-made person. So the statue is basically curving itself out of a block of stone. This is all about self-development. Yeah. I can give you the tools, and it has a lot of tools at the bottom of it. So this shows that leadership development is not a one-size-fits-all. But it's you who need to pick the tools that work for you, that work within your context, your environment. And that requires self-determination as well. And the other thing is I wanted it to be gender neutral. So not a female version of a leader, not a male version of a leader, because obviously it applies to both. So that's where I wanted. That means I had a lot of decisions to make in the process of, deciding what the cover would look like. And then when it comes to editing the book, I'll tell you something. I did hire an editor. I rejected most of the changes they wanted to make.
Okay.
And that was for two reasons. It was obviously the editor was very good in what they did, had a lot of experience, but came from a different context. And so that was where I had to explain things from a scientific point of view as well as a practitioner point of view. And the other thing was that the editor was mainly in a US context.
Okay.
So there was a little bit of that in terms of how certain things are.
Are things too different?
They are different. They are different. And now I chose for the book to be published in American English.
Okay.
And that was a deliberate choice because obviously US is a very large country. Many states, many companies are based in there. Many learning and development practitioners are based in there. So it was a deliberate choice for it to be in American English.
It was your target audience.
Yes, mainly. Well, I was surprised though, because if I look at the statistics now, the book has sold in all the major Amazon marketplaces, and US is the second
largest.
Yes, the second largest. UK was the first. And then you have Germany, you have India, Japan. So I was wrong in that estimation, basically. Okay. But obviously the context and the language and the way it's expressed is different.
Maybe that's why I would assume that there are some parallels between the US and the European style.
Absolutely, they are.
But I'm guessing that it's a European style and the European context of leadership. I'm still assuming so far because I haven't read the book.
So I'll tell everything I write is applicable to any company that wants to develop its leadership and any leader who wants to develop themselves as a leader. But obviously the writing style and the language would be different, I think, slightly. But this is where, you have to decide after the editor has gone through the book and has suggested changes, whether you want to accept them or reject them.
What's your favorite part of the book?
What's my favorite part of the book? That's a very good question. I think I would say three parts. The first chapter is, I think, fundamental because this is where I talk about building a leadership identity and what goes into it. And I think a lot of myths are basically demystified there. And the other key parts is how leaders actually learn, how behavioral change actually happens. And finally, how we can do that within an organizational context. So how can we build those communities of practice? How can we mentor leaders? This means how can we create leadership and mentorship groups within an organization? And and a big part of it is coaching as well. So I think these are the key parts of the book, I would say.
Why are these meaningful for you?
Because this is what I've dedicated my career to. This is what I'm doing, even in my own business now. And this is what I've seen working, actually.
I'm pretty sure that you encounter these individuals as well in your practice. In mine, I encounter individuals who are quite skeptical when it comes to leadership development programs or coaching. Some people come around when they experience it. Some people still don't, or some people are completely rejecting the idea from the start, for many reasons, which is fine, I would say, in the sense people might not be ready to embrace anything that they would like to change, or they think that they don't need it at that point in time. How do you go around these kind of situations in your practice?
Now, I think this is very common, and to a certain extent, I would welcome that skepticism. I think it's a good thing. Now, there are two different types in my view. There is the skepticism from an organizational point of view, and I think stakeholders, especially business owners, are right to be skeptical, because what we know is that a small percentage of leadership development programs actually lead to positive ROI. And that's for many reasons, but mainly because these programs are basically one size fits all and not developed specifically for the organization and its leaders. And this is actually the reason why I wrote this book. This is what I do in my business. So I think it's natural to have that skepticism. Any organization that invests or plans to invest should have that conversation and should have that question answered before they actually invest in anything. When it comes to individuals being skeptical, there I would say probably these individuals have a fixed mindset. We're talking about individuals who think that talent is natural. You're either a born leader, or you're not. People don't change, personalities don't change, and so on, which is wrong. Fundamentally wrong. We know from research and from my own experience that people do change. I've seen dramatic changes in terms of how someone leads a team. Examples of leaders who were not appreciated by their teams for many reasons, be it the mindset, the communication style, the collaboration style, the behaviors, many different things that went into it. And through training and coaching, 6 months down the line, the results change tremendously. You have a team now that appreciates their leader. You have a team that celebrates their leader. You see it in employee survey results that have completely changed, black and white, in like 6 months. Or I've seen cases where a leader was basically about to exit the company, working on a performance improvement plan. We all know that what that means many times. Mm-hmm. And then 6 months down the line, this individual was promoted to a more senior role. So it does work as long as the program is tailored to the individual's needs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to these individuals, what I usually say is, you are right to be skeptical. I just need you to dedicate 1 hour of your time, come into my training room, and if after an hour you feel like this was a wasted time, you're free to go. Very few times they've left. Very few times they've left.
I think, if anything, I think it just feels good to speak to someone who's there to listen and to provide an unfiltered and objective perception or view of that kind of situation. I think it just feels good about it as well.
Absolutely. Give them that opportunity to talk about their experiences, talk with their peers about their experiences, but also it's the way you deliver a leadership program, right? If you have a facilitator who is very black and white, presents models as if they are something, undeniable truths, then I think it's very normal for anyone to go, I don't really think that this is developing me in any way.
Yeah.
So I think if the facilitator comes from a background where they have the expertise, they've done their research, they're not presenting models and theories as black and white. And if they also have the experience, because I think this is where we actually go wrong with it. You can't have a senior leader within a training room who has been a leader for quite a few years, and then you have a facilitator who has never been a leader before, and they are trying now to teach leadership to someone else. Both need to come into play. You need to have both the expertise and the experience.
Yeah. I can't count the times where we were giving a workshop in most cases, because in coaching is a little bit more intimate, that at least in my experience, and the expectations of people are quite set from the first session. But when we're delivering workshops, people expect that we have a magic wand and the one answer that fits all. Even in having a conversation about, you mentioned PIP programs, about an underperforming employee, for example. There is no one size fits all message that you can say, but there's a structure. There is a formula of how you can structure the message in a way that you tick all the boxes, but ultimately you need to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's very hard. So when we are asked, okay, how would you tackle that kind of situation with that kind of person? Depends on the context. It depends on the individual. It depends on your relationship that you have with that kind of individual. It depends on how long the person has been there. So it depends on so many things that there is no, that's actually what I say. I would be, I'm trying to come up with the English term. I would be faking an answer. I would not be telling you the truth if I tell you I have an answer for you for that to answer that question.
There's no black and white in that situation. It really depends on the person, right? It really depends on who you are as a leader, what the relationship you have with the team member, and who the team member is. And if anyone says, no, I would expect to have a black and white answer, then I would say you're not needed then. We don't need a leader. Then I can potentially have just HR dealing with these kind of issues, and we don't need a leader for that team. Or I can have an AI robot now, and we don't need a human being to be able to read people and communicate with people and understand their emotions and respond to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're not really needed in that case. And there I would ask also the question, do you want to be a leader?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you want to be a leader in the sense of you want to be a leader of a project, of a process, of a tool, but not necessarily of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's totally acceptable. You just need to know what you want to do.
That's why it comes from within.
Exactly. It comes from within. Made from within.
It's very hard. I mean, leadership, I think it's one of the hardest things that you can do on the job, because there are things that you will get wrong no matter how experienced you are, because reading people is biased by default. It's based on a hunch. Yes, experience does help you understand more body language and tonality and all of these kind of things, but you might get it wrong as well.
And this is why we say it's so important to listen. Listen before you speak. Listen more than you speak. I think that's the key element of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And don't try to have all the answers. You shouldn't have all the answers. That's why you have a team.
Mm-hmm.
If you have all the answers and if you can do everything that the team does, then you don't need a team.
Yeah.
So I think it goes more to that. But obviously it takes, it's a development process to get to that, because when you first become a leader, you want to have all the answers. You want to be the best in the team. You want to be the most competent. You want to be able to do everything. And so it takes time for most leaders at the beginning to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And to realize that my performance now is not evaluated based on what I do. My performance is evaluated based on what my team does and how well they do. So it takes some time for that mindset shift.
And to set the right expectations.
Absolutely.
Because if you're listening, but you're not setting the right expectations. I mean, like you rightfully said, come to my training room, and by the end of that you're not satisfied, you're free to go. You're setting the expectation there. You need to set the expectation from the get-go, so your team knows what's expected from them, and you know what you are expecting from them at the same time as well.
Yeah.
So it's
And I think you have the same or similar experiences where most of the cases where somebody is underperforming is actually because they have never had clear expectations from the get-go. And so this is where the confusion happens. I don't really know what is expected of me. I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to, but I'm not really. And then the moment that these expectations are set and feedback is given, automatically the performance of the individual improves. Why? What happened? Overnight, we had competence improvement overnight? Not really. It was the clarity that they were missing.
And if it doesn't, you can hold people accountable for it. So then you can actually, because two things can happen. Either the person improves or the person shows their true color with that.
And which is totally fine, right? And then you can say, okay, here we have a gap. How are we going to close that gap? Is it, and obviously you need to answer then the question, is it a competence gap or is it a motivation gap? Yep. So is it a will or a skill issue you're dealing with? Sometimes it could be both.
Yes. And the beauty of this is that things then become, I wouldn't say easy because it's never easy to, especially if it's an emotional conversation. But if it's a motivational conversation, then you can, it becomes a cultural debate. Say, listen, this is the way we do things here. This is the way we would like things to be done here. If you don't fit with that modus operandi in a way, we can even help you find another location or we can recommend you to someone else who can give you what you're looking for in that sort of way. So it becomes a cultural thing and you create a sort of a relationship with the employee. It's not easy. It requires...
It requires open conversations, transparency, but also it requires maturity, both from the employee and from the leader, to have that open and honest conversation and to say, do you really like what you're doing? And I always said, you only have one life. If you're going to dedicate 8 hours of your day, 1/3 of your life into something, make sure it's the right thing for you. And I think that conversation sometimes is a blessing because it pushes people, it challenges people to question themselves in terms of what's my motivation? What do I want to do in my life? Is what I'm doing right now in my life matching with my long-term aspirations? Am I going in the right path or have I lost my way somewhere? And obviously, after you have that conversation, then you need to find a way forward. What's the plan then?
What's your favorite part about your job, Maria?
My favorite part, obviously, seeing people change, especially when they had that self-doubt at the beginning. They weren't really sure they could do it, and then eventually seeing them basically becoming what they wanted to become. I think this is the most empowering thing, and I've seen this happen. I have seen this happening many times in my career. So this is the most empowering thing. I love, obviously, empowering people, developing people, whether that's through coaching, whether that's through training. I love group settings, so being in a training room and having that conversation, because obviously it's not just me developing others. They're developing themselves, they're developing together, and I'm also learning a lot from them as well at the same time. So training, coaching are the key elements. I also do supervision for coaches. So then it's more about professional development, ethical standards in coaching practice and so on. So a lot of that goes into it. It's all about development. My career has always been about development.
So it seems that you found your calling. What did it take? Were you always driven to enter the HR world, let's say, and the coaching world, or what was the story behind that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I always knew I wanted to be in education, so I start very, very early in my life. I would say since primary school. If anyone would ask me, what do you want to become when you grow up? I always said, I want to become a teacher. And actually, I did become a teacher. So when it was time to choose a university path, I said, I'm going to go into education. And I did that. So I studied and I started working as a teacher. But the first year I worked as a teacher, I very quickly realized that, mandatory education, and I was working in primary school, secondary school, and high school is very prescribed. It's very rigid. We don't necessarily teach kids what they want to learn or what they need to learn. We just teach them what's prescribed.
Yeah.
And I had an issue with that. So I started questioning if that was what I wanted to do. And this is when I decided that I wanted to go into adult education.
Okay.
Because there people, obviously adults have more agency in terms of what they want to learn and how they want to learn it. So I moved into higher education. I was teaching at university. And then at the same time, I went into corporate learning and development. Many different industries. So I worked in manufacturing, banking, and iGaming. But always my focus was learning and development, talent development, a little bit wider than that. So in most organizations, you're just learning and development. In my case, it was talent development. So that included performance management and other HR topics. And always diversity and inclusion was a big part of what I did. So a little bit wider than that. And obviously I was completing my studies at the same time. I have quite a few degrees. Okay. I have the doctorate in leadership development. I have a master's in psychology and the neuroscience of mental health. So it was always around development. And I think what intrigues me the most is change, how people go through personal and professional breakthroughs.
What's a story that shaped your career on this aspect? Perhaps as someone that you've helped, someone that you supported, can be professional, personal, someone that...
I mean, there are so many stories of people who literally changed their lives. Obviously, my own team always holds a special place in my heart because I worked with them. So for instance, in manufacturing, I had members in my team who were working in the factory, as machine operators for years and years and years. I'm talking about more than a decade. And then all of a sudden, they had that opportunity to move out of that context and join my team. And since then, they've flourished. So I think that's the most empowering thing, not just for them, but for me, to see people grow and change their lives.
That's very empowering. I mean, when I think about this, is that I founded my business endeavor to help people identify the skills to lead themselves and others, which is very, very, I mean, there are some parallels between myself and yourself. Perhaps not from the teaching aspect per se, but to help people identify their own tools, like you're advocating with your book, and sharpening those tools by getting some help, external help as well. And that has been my guiding post as well, and even the programs that we do at Endeavor, because ultimately we're facilitators.
Absolutely.
It's
facilitators of change.
Yeah. And that's where we merge the knowledge, because most often than not, as you mentioned, we are interacting with adults that have their own experiences, they have their own academic courses, they have their own view, their perspective. So to go in from an educator mindset, sometimes it is a little bit presumptuous as well.
Absolutely.
So I'd rather go in as a facilitator and someone to brainstorm with. And I'm going back a little bit about the tailor-made approach. And I think that gives you energy as well, that unique interaction that you have with a new coachee or with someone that you've met over time and that you're helping develop. It's that uniqueness in the approach and that uniqueness in experience. I think it gives you energy, it rejuvenates you, because it's an emotionally tiring job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to meet them where they are. So there's no teaching in that sense. Yes, I've been a teacher, but I don't teach when it comes to leadership development. I facilitate change. So I'll give you some tools, evidence-based tools. You will pick the tools that work for you. Not everything works for you, and not everything is suitable for your particular situation. But it's also about, through these discussions and through the self-reflection cycle you need to go through, what you develop is self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing, self-awareness and the ability to self-reflect and the ability to understand other people. I think these are the main things that you get out of leadership development. And I always say, when it comes to leadership development, it's a cycle. So yes, obviously we give them certain tools, but that's just one element of the development cycle. First, they need to basically identify what their own needs are. What do I need? What is it that I'm finding difficult right now? What are my challenges? Perhaps I have challenges having difficult conversations with people. Perhaps I have challenges addressing underperformance in my team, whatever that would be. And then once you identify those, then you obviously need to have that conversation and say, okay, what is it that I'm missing here? And through the training and through the coaching, we give you tools. You need to pick the tools that work for you and for your situation. But through all of this process, which I always say it's a continuous process, the most important thing that happens is that you develop a leadership identity. People talk about leadership styles. I'm not really a fan of leadership styles. You develop a leadership identity, because a leadership identity is not a rigid thing. It really depends on the people around you. It really depends on your team members. So my approach to you as one of my team members is going to be very different from my approach to somebody else. That doesn't mean that I'm unfair and I treat people differently. That means that I meet them where they are.
Maria, speaking about, on the note actually on leadership identity, and we've mentioned self-awareness a couple of times. What is your take? Why do we find it difficult to be self-aware and to seek self-awareness?
Because it requires inner work. So it requires us to self-reflect hard and deep and for a long time to understand ourselves, understand our strengths, be open and vulnerable about our weaknesses, because we all have them. Some people are more open to admitting they have weaknesses. For other people, it's harder due to insecurities, due to many reasons. And so recognizing that you have strengths, recognizing what these strengths are, recognizing what your weaknesses are, recognizing how your behavior is impacting you, your life, and other people. How the decisions you've made in your life have impacted you, whether you go on autopilot at times and you keep on repeating the same mistakes over and over again. What are your triggers? What are your fears? And all of that requires a lot of inner work, and it's a painful process. It's a painful process because obviously you need to go through memories, good and bad.
Yeah.
You need to recognize why certain things have happened in your life. And that requires a lot of... it requires, I'm not sure what the right word is, but I think you need to be very strong to go through that process and resilient. And I think that's the reason why it's so difficult for most people to be self-aware, but it's a continuous process. And I also believe that people change. People change based on their life experiences, based on where they are, but the stage in their life is the life stage, the career stage. So people constantly change, and this is why we need to constantly self-reflect in order to remain self-aware.
I completely agree with you. I think it's a very painful process. I think the word that you perhaps were looking for, at least the word that came to me when you were describing that process, is a kind of patience. In a way, because self-awareness or trying to be more self-aware is a very fluid thing. Sometimes you feel very self-aware and sometimes you feel that you have the key to the maze of your inner world, but sometimes you also feel lost in your inner world as well. And sometimes we are haunted by the things that we overcame in the past. So even if we've been in public speaking spaces multiple times, sometimes we have cold feet or might feel underprepared. You give a lot of keynote speeches as well. And I would assume that you still feel a little bit anxious before you start saying your first couple of words, and then you get adjusted to it. I think that's part of the process, and you might feel, why am I feeling like this? I've done it so many times. And
I mean, specifically with public speaking, because I started doing that very young, because I was teaching, right? And so I was 20 years old when I started teaching. And so you had to speak in public and in front of an audience that was pretty much your age. So there was a lot of fear back then. And I had to overcome all of my insecurities, because you're not going to manage if you don't do that, if you don't overcome the insecurities. So I remember spending night after night rehearsing, preparing, making myself feel comfortable and confident, which was a very hard thing to do. But I can say that I have overcome that. So what tends to happen now is I'm always very prepared. And obviously I need to know what I'm talking about. Otherwise I wouldn't accept to give a keynote or to participate in a panel that I don't consider myself to be an expert in that field. So I'm selective when it comes to what I talk about. And I think most people should be selective. Don't just say yes to everything that comes your way, because obviously it has to do with your reputation as well, and your long-term, the reputation of your business if you're self-employed or if you have your own business. So that's one element. But what tends to happen with me is I'm very well prepared. And so, yes, you do feel nervous before you actually do perhaps your introduction, but it immediately goes away the moment I have people interacting. And I make sure that I interact with them as soon as I get onto the stage. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a question, there needs to be a way to interact with them, there needs to be a story, there needs to be something that gets their attention.
I think my favorite strategy when it comes to public speaking or giving a keynote or even starting a workshop, in my case, it's I'll often say something that I believe it ties everyone together. So it makes my approach or myself relatable in a way that, hey, we're here, we're spending these X amount of time together, and this is what it's common amongst us. So I think starting off we're speaking about video editing before we hit the record button, and this was what is almost referred to as the hook.
Absolutely.
The hook to grab the attention of the audience, and for me that is something that makes what I'm about to say relatable.
Yes. And that's what I was about to say. I think that's the quickest and easiest way to make people feel comfortable when they can relate to you. And I always say, when somebody meets you for the first time, they very quickly, within the first 30 seconds, they try to evaluate two things. Are you competent enough? So can I respect you? And more importantly, can I trust you? So this goes back to the competence and warmth element. Can I respect you? So do you have the competence in order for me to respect you? But equally so, can I trust you? Can I relate to you? And how can I relate to you? And so this is where I think, especially in public speaking spaces, you need to establish that very, very early. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think works for me is, because people tend to tell me, it's very engaging from start to finish. And I think the reason why this happens is because myself, I'm a person that gets bored very easily. So when I prepare my talks, when I prepare my workshops, I need to make sure it's engaging throughout and there are no gaps in between, because I get bored myself. And I can't do this to anybody else. I can't feel like the room is not engaged. They're not 100% here.
In fact, I have a bit of I think it's a good thing, but sometimes it might get in the way. I often go off script. Mm-hmm. So when I'm giving a workshop, I prepare the presentation. Usually it just has some prompts. It's not a very, very busy visual. And in fact, I usually use images just to instigate a group activity or a discussion. And sometimes I go off script based on what I'm feeling that the audience would need to hear. And for me, that's the most interesting and fun part in the workshops that I deliver. So I like to go off script, but obviously maintaining the theme of the delivery. So if we're speaking about leadership or managing stress or having difficult conversations at the place of work, it's usually tied within the same theme, let's say. But that's the most I think I enjoy, I guess.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can't really learn everything by heart, especially if you're delivering a full day of training. You can't really remember everything by heart. What I like to do is, obviously, I want to make sure that there is an agenda, that there are certain topics that are in the agenda, there are activities. There is room for, obviously, going off script, as you say, having those conversations. And it's also what the audience brings to you.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about a topic, but they might have a specific challenge, and then somebody brings it up, and then the entire audience is actually talking about that particular aspect of the topic you're discussing. And so inevitably you need to focus on that. So then you have to go off script, certainly. But obviously there needs to be some structure in what you're delivering. And if it's an audience that you're giving in one-off keynote, you're probably not going to know who the audience is exactly. So you'll have to go off script if you see that there's interest in terms of a particular aspect of your keynote. But if it's an audience you're delivering training for, like leadership training, I make sure I have studied the audience beforehand. I make sure I've spoken to key stakeholders. I know the organizational culture. I know what the challenges are. And if possible, I will also have meetings with key stakeholders, senior managers within the business, to know what it is that they're dealing with. So the case studies I use, the examples I use are very tailor-made, and they feel like, okay, it feels like she has been in the organization before. She knows what we are dealing with. Mm-hmm. So then you have less of room to go off script because it's already in the script.
Yes. I mean, and it builds trust as well.
Absolutely.
So it facilitates the process, or make things a little bit faster in a way, in terms of connecting with the people and connecting with your audience. What is your opinion on full day training? Because it can be quite intense.
Well, I've done everything. I've done a couple of hours. I've done half days. I've done full days. I've done weeks worth of training. It really depends. But I would say if you're going to go for a long form of training, that would be multiple days or a week, then I would certainly have it very well spaced out. And I would say then usually I would combine it with other activities like team building activities. I would have people in an offsite venue, traveling, getting together. So it's more of an immersive experience. I also do a lot of outdoors activities. So getting people to climb a mountain as well as having a leadership program at the same time, which is a completely different experience. Because there you actually build a team. There you actually build leadership in practice, in action. And there you actually see how people react. They really get to know themselves in situations where they are completely out of their comfort zone.
Yes, and they have to trust each other.
They have to trust each other. They have to trust themselves. And obviously, I'm not going on these activities by myself. We also have certified people who know how to, hike, depending on the location. Usually, these activities right now I'm organizing in Greece.
Okay.
In a particular Mountain Olympus, which is the tallest mountain.
We've been there last year.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Did you climb the mountain?
I think we did. What's it called? Canyoning there.
Okay.
So I think I'm not sure whether we climbed to the top, but we've been quite.
I mean, you would know if you had been to the top.
Oh, they wouldn't.
It's a challenge, and you need to have somebody to guide you. You need a guide there, and then Scotland is very beautiful in the Highlands. So I think these activities are where people actually completely immerse themselves, completely out of the office environment. And especially if there is, if the purpose of the program is to build a team, if there is workplace conflict that needs to be resolved, I think this is a perfect setting for it.
It's a neutral place. This ties in very well because recently, I think it was late last year, we launched a particular facet at Endeavour, the well-being programs, and we are slowly introducing various programs within organizations. We have a good connection with yoga instructors, with personal trainers, with people who are very well versed in nature, trekking, treasure hunts, as much as we can do in outdoors. We haven't been abroad so far. I wouldn't mind going back to the Highlands. But locally going off-site, Malta being a small island, I still think there are some pockets of places where you can immerse yourself. So I think it's just small, and you need to be selective in the places.
As long as you get people out of their comfort zones, as long as they do something that they don't normally do on a, on their own or in a
Yes.
daily, weekly basis. It's something unique, something they've never done before. And they are doing it with other people that they work with. So I think this is where teams are actually built.
And what I'm appreciating about our conversation is that we are speaking about leadership in this conversation, that it's not just professional development, but it's also personal development. And it starts from a place from a question of who we are and who we want to be. And that answer will shape the type of leader who will be, not the other way around, because usually it's believed that it's the other way around. We are good leaders because we are good leaders at work.
No, I mean, you need to have the competence in your field, but you're not necessarily going to be the best one in that field. But you need to have the ability to lead a team. That's what you need to be good at. So it's a different thing to be, a good developer, to be a good lawyer, to be whatever you are, and a different thing to be a leader of a development team, of any team really. So, and what does that mean? It means that you have the interpersonal and intrapersonal skills to be a leader of that team. So it has all to do with you, your behavior, and how you interact with other people.
What was the toughest decision that you had to do in order to be the professional you are today?
Toughest decision? That's a very good question. I've been in very particular environments, I would say, with a lot of challenges.
Okay.
It was very unique. If I was to perhaps choose one experience that has shaped me as a leader, I would choose this. So the first time I became a leader, I was in my mid-20s, so quite young. I was managing a team, quite large team, but it was my first week.
Okay.
First week, new organization, new industry, basically a couple of days on the job. And we had a customer audit. And so during the customer audit, I'm presenting certain KPIs. Truth to be told, I didn't really know much about it. Obviously, I was just a couple of days on the job. So the auditor asked, how was this KPI calculated? I was like, that's a good question. Don't really have an answer. So I said, one of my team members was there, and I said, would you be able to help with this one? And the individual said, I don't really remember how it was calculated. Obviously, it wasn't the best thing to say in front of an auditor. So I said, in that moment, I could have easily said, I'm new, I'm sorry, I don't really know, and just brush it off, basically. But I said, this is, and I did not say that loud, obviously, I said that to myself, this is an opportunity for you to showcase your leadership. Even though I had never been a leader before. So what I said is, I'm really sorry, we don't have an answer right now. If you could give me until the end of the day, it was midday already, so it was around noon. If you could give me until the end of the day, I'll come back to you with an answer. And so they said, okay. So went back, I've asked the team again, what happened here? How was this calculated? I get the same answer. I don't remember how this was calculated. I don't really know who prepared the presentation. There was a lot of movement internally. And also the person who had prepared the presentation was somebody who had applied for my role and were never given proper feedback.
Internally?
Yeah.
Okay. And you were an external?
Yes,
okay.
I was an external and I had no experience in the industry as well.
That must have hit quite hard for you, the person.
Absolutely, right? So in that moment, what I did was I said, I understand. And I understand that you haven't been given feedback, because the person was open with me and they said what happened. They were basically on their way out. of the company. So they were open to me, and I said, look, I completely understand. What I can do from my end is I'll make sure that for the time you'll stay with this team and with me, I'll give you everything I can. I'll share everything I can with you so that you can develop your skills and get the role you wanted, whether it's here or somewhere else. And the person was really appreciative of that. Obviously, they didn't expect that. And I said, let's sit down together and let's figure it out. We have until the end of the day. Let's find a way to give an answer. And so we worked together. I ordered sushi.
Okay.
We ate. Food always works with people. And so we sat down together as a team, equals. There wasn't a leader and team member. There wasn't any power relationship there. We're equals. We're just working this. We're just working on this together, and we'll have to find an answer. And that's exactly what we did, basically. We found an answer, returned to the auditor, and said, this is how this KPI was calculated. And we managed to pass with flying colors the audit, so no non-conformities there, which was unexpected, given how things turned out to be. And with that member, I still have relationship, and I mean, there is a lot of appreciation. And for me, that was a defining moment in terms of my leadership approach and my leadership philosophy for many reasons. First of all, because you don't throw people under the bus, even if they make a mistake. Mm-hmm. Second, even if it's your first day, and even if you have no experience in the industry, no experience in the organization, it's your first leadership role, you take responsibility. Mm-hmm. You step up. If you're the leader, you have to take responsibility, even if it's not your mistake. And that mindset has guided me throughout my career. You step up, you take responsibility, no matter if it's not your fault. You never point fingers, you never throw people under the bus.
Amazing. Something that came to mind is that now that you have some experience, more experience, I would say, would you do something different than you did back then?
In that particular instance, I wouldn't. But generally speaking, yes, many times I could have handled things differently as a leader. But what I was good at is I was reflecting quick. So I would make a mistake, reflect quick, and then go back the next day and say, I'm sorry, the way I handled it yesterday wasn't the right way. So here's what I'm going to do. But I was always very open to receiving that feedback. And oftentimes I had to encourage people to give constructive feedback. So I would have my team and I would say, okay, what's your feedback? I've given you all feedback. What's your feedback for me as your leader? And they will say all the nice things. Quite common. It's very hard to give constructive feedback, let alone to your manager. So then I would say, you're not going to leave this room until you give me constructive feedback. So you might spend the whole day here.
What was the toughest feedback you were given?
I think, and that feedback I've gotten not only from team members, but in general, because I have very high expectations of myself, that I don't have high expectations of others, but when you have very high expectations of yourself and you're generally speaking a very structured person and you're a high achiever, automatically people think that you have very high expectations of them. So it causes them to feel a little bit of unease at times. Okay. So that was one thing I had to work on in terms of making it very clear that just because I have so high expectations of myself, I don't have unrealistic expectations when it comes to you. I do have high expectations of you because I believe in you and because I want you to succeed and I want you to reach your full potential. But that doesn't mean I have unrealistic expectations, and that doesn't mean I have no empathy. One of the things I truly have is empathy. So I understand other people, I understand why certain things happen, I understand how people feel, what triggers them, what their insecurities are, what their fears are, and respond to that.
Maria, we spoke about self-awareness and what makes a good leader, and your experience as well from a young age, and your experience now that you've been exposed to other situations. What what would you be working on now to cultivate more self-awareness?
Obviously, as you grow older, you change. And so, as I said before, it's a continuous process. I always self-reflect. Even like making the change from being in a senior leadership role within a large organization to now being my own boss and having my own business, that's a big transition as well. And so that requires, again, go through the process of self-reflection, self-awareness. So I'm learning a lot about myself again from the beginning, because it's a new setting now. It's something I have never done before.
How come you made the leap? I haven't done so far. What made you do the leap from a full-time job to being self-employed?
So it was always a goal of mine. So it was very intentional and it was planned. I didn't exactly know that it was going to happen at the beginning of the year, but I reached the point where I had finished my doctorate. I had worked in different industries in senior leadership roles, and I had published the book as well. So I was getting a lot of interest. I was part-time self-employed, so I was coaching clients, but I got to the point where they would reach out for training, they would reach out for other services, and obviously having a full-time job did not allow me to do that. Sometimes it's a conflict of interest as well. And so I had to make a decision at that point. And I said to myself, what's holding you back? And the reality was there was nothing holding me back at that point. I just had to make the decision, because we always postpone things and we say, okay, I'm going to do one more thing and then I'm going to do this. But I had no excuses left. So what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
Gain more education. How much more education are you going to get? Gain more experience. Okay. How are you going to get more experience in terms of diversified experience? And so I got to the point where I had no excuses left. It's a leap. And it's obviously, you have to have, and I'm going to say a cliche now in terms of, you need to be resilient. You need to believe in yourself. You do need to believe in yourself. And you need to be very okay with being rejected, because the rejection is going to come for sure. And if anyone who has a business says, I've never been rejected, probably you're really staying within your comfort zone and you're not really trying hard enough to get bigger clients, bigger projects, and so on and so forth. So you need to be very okay with being rejected.
And that teaches you stuff. That rejection teaches you stuff, because it forces you to self-reflect.
It forces you to self-reflect, to say, okay, what is it that I can do even better? And obviously you can be an expert in your field, but you might not necessarily be the best salesperson or the best marketing person. So there is a gap in competence you probably need to hire for, or you need to become very good at if you don't have the capital to hire someone for it. So that's one of the things that you need to self-reflect on. But it's also, it might not be the right clients for you. It might not be the right organization for you, or it might be that they don't have the budget for you right now.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Training, usually it's not, some companies do cater for training, some companies do not. And sometimes it's seen as an expense as well.
As an expense. Obviously, they don't really understand the return on investment aspect of it. Or it could be that it's they're going through tough time and the budget is to be spent on other things. And again, totally fine.
Maria, I'm going to flip the script. What question would you ask me as the host of the podcast?
Well, what I want to ask you is, obviously you're very ambitious. We had an informal chat backstage, and you told me all of the things that you're currently doing, right? And so my question is, what drives you? What's the motivation for you?
It's actually something that I haven't thought in a while. So thank you for asking me that. I think what drives me is the mission that I have, is that I honestly believe that if we look inwards at ourselves, we can identify tools that we didn't believe that we had, but with the right questions, and if I can facilitate that, I think we can do great things. So I guess what motivates me is that I'm trying to influence as many people as I can in a very slow burn format, by practicing what I'm preaching. So managing the time, staying present, learning as much as I can. And I think that is what drives me.
Absolutely. Lead by example. So I like that. And I think there are many parallels in terms of what you and I do. So yeah.
Thank you for asking me that question. I think I will spend the rest of the evening thinking about it.
It's always good to go back to that question, because obviously we're very busy. We do a lot of things. Sometimes, you receive a proposal, or you're being invited to do something, and it's exciting, and you start working on it, and you never pose the question, why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing? And what's the long-term vision as well?
And I think that it's good to answer that question from time to time, because it's a good reminder of why you're doing what you're doing and how far you've come sometimes.
Absolutely.
Actually, it happened to me this morning. So just before coming here, and I did reflect up, had a bit of a nostalgia feel to it, and we had a meeting with a company located in Halfar near Brizabuja. And during my university years, I've spent 4 years working in a factory in that area, and I passed through that same road that I've passed so many times during those 4 years. And how long was it? Was it 15 years ago? And I was like, what did I do in the past 15 years? And when I was driving here to the studio, what did I do? And reflecting upon the things that I did, the things that I've learned so far. It was, I think there are some parallels again with what happened today.
Absolutely. Because sometimes, you think of all the things you haven't achieved, and or you feel like you're falling behind, and you don't stop to actually reflect and say, how far have I come?
Yes.
And to me, that happens when I think of, let's say, I'll go back to being 20 again, which is quite some time ago. And so I'm thinking, if I was to tell my 20-year-old self that, in my age, I would be where I am, would I believe it? I wouldn't. I didn't have a lot of things. I didn't have the support. I didn't have the means, the financial means. I didn't have a safety net to do all of the things that I've done. So I'm very proud in that sense, but I rarely stop and think and reflect on how far I've come. Most of the time, I'm thinking of all the things I want to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something very important. Sometimes you feel like you're falling behind. And I think you can relate to this. It feels like that almost all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you hop on social media, let's stick to LinkedIn because we're both there and we need to be, because our target audience is there. And you see other peers doing great things as well, and you're partly happy for them, but at the same time, am I doing the right thing? That I'm moving in the right trajectory? And that's something that we feel that's very human and very natural as well. So we're all constantly, I don't like the word, but I will use it. It feels like we're in competition all the time.
Yeah. I never had the comparison element. So, and I think it's because I never expected that. I always had very high expectations of myself, but because I didn't have the means and because I didn't have the support, it was quite unrealistic for certain things for me to happen. And so I never compared myself to anyone else, but I always compared myself to what I wanted to do. So I always had a to-do list of the things I wanted to achieve. And what happened in my life is that I always set goals, and I always had that time frame in my mind, like things had to be achieved and things had to be ticked off the list. And I always did that before they were meant to happen. For instance, the doctorate, I got it a year earlier than I should have. A lot of the things I've done, I've done them in a younger age than it's normally expected to be done. But what that creates is obviously then even higher expectations, and there is no end to it.
Yes.
So as I'm getting older now, I'm realizing that, okay, you've done well so far, and potentially at an unexpected rate, it's okay. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. And it was never for me to prove anything to anyone. It was more about proving things to myself. But also, for me, it's a motivation thing. So when things go slow, it's not motivating enough.
Yeah.
It's just who I am. So that goes with self-awareness. But it also goes with, as I said before, what is the message you're conveying to other people, for instance, to your team? When you go at such a fast pace, are you creating, for instance, like an unrealistic sense of pace for others?
It can be exhausting for others as well.
Absolutely.
So you're not doing it deliberately, but at the same time you're exhausting your peers.
Yes, you want to motivate them, you want to influence them, you want to empower them. You want, obviously, if you want to motivate somebody, you need to be very motivated yourself, but you don't want to make them feel like they are falling behind, that the pace is unrealistic. I can never really catch up with the pace. So
it's not something very easy to hold the brakes to, because you need to press the brake lever quite hard sometimes, and to slow things down. Because sometimes when you're too focused on one thing, you might miss the things that are happening in the periphery.
Absolutely.
And I think it's good to have anchors, and this can be in the form of people, it can be in the form of mentors, for example. It can be our colleagues. Just a quick sight on the side.
But equally so, and that's my experience at least, when you want to achieve something big, something which is not within your reach, you really need to put that focus, and inevitably you lose sight of other things.
Yes, I think it needs to happen.
It will happen. I think inevitably happen.
I'm not sure whether we would have achieved the same results if you don't have that kind of focus.
If you don't have that kind of, or you wouldn't achieve them within the same time frame. Potentially it would have taken much longer. Potentially you would have lost your way. So I do think that maniacal focus on things is actually what drives you to achieve. But once you achieve something, then you need to pause and you need to say, okay, am I heading towards the right direction? Is this still what I want to do? Mm-hmm. And I think that's crucial.
And that's actually something that I'm trying to do with Endeavor. It's something that that's why I purposely mentioned the slow burn, because I'm taking my time with it. So I'm quite focused on it, because I'm working day in, day out on it. But at the same time, let me go back a little bit. So my compromise that I made with myself with starting my own business and managing the things that I do is that I don't want to miss out on my social life. I still want to keep in contact with my friends and the people that are important to me. I don't want to compromise on that. I still have to make some compromises from time to time, but there is a limit that I don't want to overstep. So, and that brings with itself a natural consequence that you've mentioned, that things might be achieved at a slower rate or later on.
But that's not necessarily bad.
No, for me it's not bad. It's not something that I accept, and I'm willing to sacrifice for it. And I don't want to rush things just because I don't want to miss out on the other things in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really important to actually have that conversation with yourself and say, okay, I use a tool for this. It's called the wheel of life. And so you have 8 aspects of life. Where am I at in these different aspects? Because career is just one element of these 8. What about the rest? What about my relationship? What about my family? What about my health?
Yeah.
So where am I in the different areas? If I was to give a score from 1 to 10, how would I score myself in these different areas? And if you see that your score in certain areas is low and very high in other areas, you might need to recalibrate that. Right? Because life is not just about career. Life is not just about relationships. Life is not just about health. It's all of that.
Yeah.
All of that needs to come together. At times, it will be disproportional. And that's okay, as long as you're very aware that it's just for a period of time.
I think it's unrealistic and to have that textbook work-life balance. There is never a balance, because in order to introduce something has to go, and whilst you're trying to reach something on your left, you're missing something on your left.
I really don't like the construct of work-life balance, because what does life mean? And why is work not included in life? It doesn't really make sense to me. For me, what's really important is that you have a sense of identity. You know who you are and what you want to do. So if work is very important to you and it's what gives you meaning and what gives you purpose, good. Focus on that. But perhaps there are other elements of life you need to also look into. But as long as you might say, right now, what I really want to do, what motivates me, what gives me purpose is work. Not so much relationships, not so much my social life. And that's okay, as long as you're aware and as long as you self-reflect constantly and say, okay, am I still on the right path?
And it's a process that we go through life. I think every life has its own chapter. We start off this conversation with the book, and I think it makes it of a good analogy. We have multiple chapters in our book of life, and that's something that there's actually a book of life, you know. I remember that. But what we're doing right now is a chapter in it, and we are the authors of it. So it's good to ask these kind of questions to see if the ingredients that we're putting in this chapter are the ingredients that we want to put into this chapter.
The other thing that often comes, when we talk about work-life balance, the other thing that usually comes is work smarter, not harder, which sounds very good. Yeah. But in my experience, you first need to work very hard to learn how to work smart.
That's true.
And so it works, but not necessarily at the beginning. So I always say work both hard and smart if you want to achieve something, because working smart on its own doesn't really work.
Yeah, it's quite unrealistic.
Yes.
Maria, we're nearing the end to our conversation, but as I promised at the initial stages, I here have our beloved fishbowl. I will ask you to pick one question.
Okay.
Read it out loud.
Can I?
Yes, for sure. It's a bit invasive, isn't it?
Let me see. If I don't like the question, can I change it?
You can. I've gave that concession in the past.
I'm joking. So, what's a hobby or passion that brings you joy and personal fulfillment? Oh, that's a good question. I'm very much into physical activity and nature. Okay. So I would say hiking. I think it's where I self-reflect the most. So I would say that. I've got other hobbies. Last year I learned how to play golf. Very much a beginner though.
Okay.
So I would say hiking is the answer.
Okay. I never tried golf, not intrigued so far. I prefer something which has a little bit more movement to it.
Well, I wouldn't consider it, well, I hope the golf coach doesn't hear this, but I don't consider it a sport because you're not really moving. Now, if he hears me, he will probably say you have no idea what you're talking about. But at the initial stages, you just need to practice your swing. So it's a lot of that. So there isn't really much movement. It's a very technical sport.
So yes. Maybe at a later stage. Maria, thank you for joining me on this podcast. Thank you for reaching out. I really enjoyed the conversation. And thank you for sharing what you do. I think we have a lot of similarities in the way we approach work. And thank you for the lovely gift. You'll make me read.
I hope so. I hope so.
So thank you once again for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to meet you. You're a very nice person, and that to me is very important. Yes, very competent, very ambitious, and I truly appreciate that in others. But more importantly, how nice people are. So thank you for having me. It was lovely to meet you.
Likewise.